This is an interview that I did about current EMS pain points when it comes to suburban ambulance. So, I interviewed a former manager of mine at Suburban Ambulance in Easton, Pennsylvania, named Timothy Werkheiser. I had started out there as an EMT and I eventually became a paramedic. And I was there for about 10 years. So, question one, what do you see as the biggest human capital challenge facing the agency right now? So, when he was talking about this, he mentioned recruitment and retention are the biggest ones, that they're losing staff faster than they can bring them in. And a lot of younger employees are more hesitant to stay because of the constant stress of EMS, overtime that's there, and burnout. However, because of the staffing issues that they're having, it does make overtime necessary. And since they do pay more per shift on overtime, while people will end up picking up those shifts in order to get that money, it often comes at a mental and physical cost. So it's kind of a cycle that keeps going on and leads to burnout a lot more quickly. How does the staffing shortage affect the employees? So no one really wants to have mandatory overtime, but we have had to go into that a couple times. Obviously, with the more time that you're on a shift, the stress level is going to increase. The morale is going to go down because a lot of people are really tired and they are overworked and burnt out. The incidence of fatigue has actually resulted in some traffic accidents where they have had some EMTs and paramedics fall asleep behind the wheel. And thankfully, nobody got seriously injured, but it was a problem because it did require some truck repairs. And overall, the more fatigued and overworked that EMTs and paramedics are, the more prone they are to injuries, medication, or treatment mistakes. And they are often reporting that they're just stretched to the limit because they don't have enough downtime. The steps that they've taken so far to address the issues is that they recently changed and expanded the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program. They also had a team that was made up of peer support, who initially they received critical incident stress management training, but they also saw the need to add in peer support on just a regular basis, not just with critical incidents. So this peer support team went and got extra training in order to add that to their toolbox. However, they have been noting that because of that stigma that surrounds those types of issues, there is still some pretty low participation, but they're hoping to change that. When talking about culture playing into the success of the programs, he mentioned that culture is everything. And if there's no one actually following up or modeling the behaviors that they're wishing to see, then overall, why would employees want to do it? So he told of a story about an EMT who was making a lot of errors on his patient charts. And so, in the natural course of speaking to him about this, it turns out that he was having some major issues at home and bringing those emotions and those thought processes into work with him. So he suggested to the employee to take up the EAP program. And of course, the employee was like, yeah, sounds good. However, Tim actually followed up with him a week later to see if he had contacted them. And unsurprisingly, that employee said that he hadn't. However, because Tim actually reminded him and actually seemed to care, he wanted to call. So, in order to facilitate that even further, he gave him some time in his office to actually make that call. And now it turns out that that employee has actually been seeing a provider for the last few weeks, and he's shown improvement in a lot of areas, not only in his patient charts, because he's not making as many issues, but he's also just kind of overall seeming a lot happier. So it that employee thanked Tim for keeping on top of him instead of just throwing it out there like a lot of managers often do. When asked if they looked at any other companies' examples when it came to the wellness programs, he said somewhat. Basically, they were kind of looking at the employee program in order to see if there was good return on investment and good usage by the employees, because it is something that does cost a decent amount of money. So they're blessed in the sense that they are a larger company, and so they're more financially stable than some of the smaller companies. But they did go around to a couple of the companies around, and ultimately came up with the company that they switched to. So while there are some paid fire departments in the area where they do things like mandating fitness time, they can't do that at Suburban. So really, they focused on things like discounts to local gyms and really put a heavier emphasis on the mental health. And also, something that the EAP offers is some financial counseling as well, kind of like a wraparound service. So those are the things that they focused on more than what other companies would do, such as the fire department with the on-site gym and mandatory downtime in order to focus on that physical health. Instead, because they couldn't do that at Suburban, they did something that was similar to that in the sense of the discount to local gyms. When asking him about the earn as you learn model when it came to recruitment and education, he did say that he had heard something that AMR was doing that. And so for a while, Suburban management thought about doing something. But when they looked at the return on investment that AMR was receiving, they didn't really seem to have a high successful rate. And so after that, he didn't really follow up about it. So therefore, he didn't really know too much about the earn as you learn model. He did mention that they already have a really strong partnership with the local community college. They do recruitment directly from those classes. So they always have a stream of applications. So right now, this isn't something that they're looking into. It's still kind of, pressing the question, like if they were to do the Earn as You Learn program, do they think that that would address any diversity issues that they may be having in their current staffing model? And he said, yeah, I guess in theory it would. So people who may not be able to afford the training would now have access to the class, and then they would have a job waiting for them. But again, it's not something that they feel the need to do right now. He did mention that he has at least 30 applications that are ready to be looked at. They already do precepting for the paramedic program. And if you are going to paramedic school while you are in working for them as an EMT, they will hire from within. And then he reminded me that that's what I did. It's called patching up. And so I personally did it by my own pay. So I didn't have to sign a contract with Suburban, but they do that as well for the employees that they want to push through to go to that higher level of EMS care. So when I was talking about the cost barriers that they would have for either wellness or an Earn as You Learn program, again, he was just like, kind of pushing away the Earn as You Learn because it's not something that they want to do. So he could really only speak to the wellness program portion. He did mention that it cost about $300,000 up front. This was something that was more expensive than the previous program partnership that they had used before. But after talking to these different companies and some of their employees and seeing that they were much happier with it, as well as there was telehealth available, this was used successfully by 3 other companies, and they decided to give it a shot for a 2-year contract. So he was saying that while the larger amount was a harder pill to swallow, was it actually a barrier? No, they had the money. It's just they do need to see an overall better return in order to keep them and renew that contract when it's up. So I then asked him what success would look like in 5 years when it came to wellness and recruitment. And he mentioned a higher retention of employees, a reduced need for overtime hours and pay, lower injury and workman comp claims, and obviously overall happier employees. And my final question was, what advice would you give to leadership to make sure these changes are to stick around within the company? He mentioned to be transparent in your end goals and the steps you'll need to achieve them. It's obviously important for everybody to understand the why in order to have more buy-in. Model what you want to happen behavior-wise, such as when he mentioned the EAP to that employee, and then he kept following up with that employee to make sure that he was, showing that he cared, but also utilizing those services, and show the employees why wellness is actually a priority, whether it's physical health or mental health. He mentioned that if leadership buys in, the employees will too, because if the leadership is doing it, employees tend to follow suit. And then he also mentioned that I should come back to Pennsylvania because they need paramedics. So, overall, my reflection on this interview is I asked about the biggest current HCM challenges, the wellness programs they have in place, and explored their openness to the Earn As You Learn initiative. And in response, it doesn't seem like recruitment is a huge issue for them right now, but retention is. While they are supportive of educational partnerships in general, they weren't interested in an Earn As You Learn initiative because they just don't see the need for it. He did also say that investment into a wellness program was worth it in the end because in the long run, in order to have a better experience, that might mean changing their company and maybe putting in more money into the situation. I was surprised at how hooked into the culture he was and at that story of following up with the specific employee. Not many managers do that type of follow up. I shouldn't really be surprised because he was my partner before he was a manager, and this is also just the type of person that he is. But I was surprised knowing that company and having been there for quite a while that they went with the higher cost company instead of staying with the cheaper one. So I was really happy to hear that they were putting a bigger emphasis on that. It's not something that I needed personally when I was there, but also I won't lie, I didn't really look into it either. And I don't even know if we had it as a priority when I was there. So, overall, wellness and recruitment are on the minds of management and public safety. And turns out they're not always opposed to spending more money if it means that higher return on investment. Because at the end of the day, not only is it good for overall morale of the workforce, but also the health, and it's good for the financial bottom line of the company too. So, an interesting conversation for sure.